Okay, so thank you for waiting. I left Chapter 8 kind of abruptly. It really wasn't abruptly, but what happened was I used Mr. X's name by accident, and so I didn't know how to edit out just the name, so I had to just snip off the end of the recording. So that's why I was cut off mid-sentence, because I don't know how to just edit the video, and I certainly wasn't going to do it all over again. So what I will recap is that Mr. X had given me this contract that was absolutely ridiculous, that I wasn't going to sign it. And so what he was saying to me was that he would um, go back to the attorneys, that the attorneys worked for him, and he would tell them what to put in it and what to take out of it so that I could be happy with it, because there wasn't even no red, there wasn't even redlining this document, because the whole thing would have been redlined. I think I read some pieces of it to you. So that's where I left off with Mr. X. Um, he was going to be able to pay us our back pay. And I know this because my friend, who was his assistant, was helping him. He was having his wife take $50,000 from her 401k. And they were just waiting for the paperwork to go through. And I knew this was true because his assistant, who was my friend, was still doing things for him, because he was still, she was just as wrapped up as everyone else, and in his games. And so she was, going shopping for Father's Day presents for him, driving to family wakes and to the banks, and running errands for him as his personal assistant. And when the money came in, she was going to get her pay. But in the meantime, he had his wife take out a 401k, $50,000 from her 401k. And that was the plan, to pay us some of our back pay. Now, keep in mind the office lease was still past due, so he owed $24,000 to the office lease at this point. The office manager was calling me up, and I was, referring her to him. And so that's where I left off in Chapter 8. I had this contract. It was no good. He was going to go back and have it rewritten. There was promise of back pay. There was swearing that the money was coming, and that I did need to come back because this was real, and he was going to do whatever he had to do to prove to me that I was wrong and that this was real. So at that point, I just, I had no reason to have daily contact with him. There was no work to be done. I wasn't getting paid. So what I did was I focused on the graduation, my daughter's graduation. I had no money coming in. I hadn't had money coming in for weeks. And so, thankfully, my nephew and my daughter graduated together from the same high school. So, thankfully, my sister, who lives about a quarter of a mile from me, threw a beautiful graduation party for both of them. There was no need for my family to come and attend two different parties. So, she threw the party at her house, and it was a beautiful graduation party. And my whole family flew in, and we were very proud of them. And this was late June, and it was a great time. And I, for a minute, I forgot all the problems. Mr. X had said he was going to show up at the party, but I didn't really put any stock in that, because there was no way he was taking the private jet here to attend a graduation party. I knew that because there was no private jet. There was no company jet. So I really wasn't concerned with it. So we get past the graduation party, and again, I still got no money coming in, but I do know that my assistant took them to pick up the paperwork. The withdrawal from the 401k was approved. Now, the only way I can imagine that his wife would just go without question and take $50,000 out of her 401k to pay for an office lease, for a job about nothing, to pay for an assistant that he doesn't need, to pay for an office manager that he doesn't need, to pay agents that he's paying base salary for that he doesn't need. is because she believes the same lie. She believes that there is going to be some huge payoff, and this $50,000 that she's withdrawing and incurring all these penalties for, these early withdrawal penalties for, is nothing. It's going to be a drop in the bucket. That's the only explanation I can think of for her not even to bat an eye about him asking her to take out $50,000 and just do it like that and just hand it over to him for this business that it has no clients. So that's where I know that, you know, his promises, his back pay. Okay, I know that that's what his plan is, to take, you know, that his wife's taking her 401k, her $50,000 out. So then, remember I told you my daughter was acting very erratic. She was just not herself. And when I came home, I wanted to find out what was going on. And she was very confrontational with me. And I'm really not the confrontational type. As far as I don't take it well. I don't do confrontation well. Especially when it's one of your children that's challenging you. You tend to stand your ground and go toe to toe. And so she said, we gotten into it. And she said, well, you know what, I'm 18 and I don't have to stay here. I could leave. I knew she wasn't going to go anywhere. But she was leaving the house, so I did the typical mom thing. And I said, well, if you're going to leave, you're certainly not going to leave with the cell phone that I paid for and the car that I paid for. So if you're going to leave, you're going to leave with your stuff, which is what you have on. So she said, fine, take the phone. She gave me the phone, and she left, and she walked out the door. Now, again, I knew she would be back. I wasn't nervous that she was never coming back. But I did sit at my kitchen table, and I cracked the code on her phone very easily, because I know my daughter. And it was at that time that I started to do the mom thing and go through her messages and try and figure out what was going on. And so it was during this time that I realized that while I was in New York, working for Mr. X, trying to better our situation, that my daughter had somehow wandered off the path. And I never noticed. And that was my job. My job was to make sure she stayed on that path. And at some point, she had gotten off it. And I never even noticed until now. So I knew my daughter needed help. So I called Mr. X and I asked him. I said, I need to know if our medical insurance is paid up, because I know it was paid in advance. And he said, yeah, it's all paid. I didn't, really tell him why. I just told him that I needed to get to a doctor. And he said, yes, it's been all paid up, and I'm positive it's paid. So I called the facility. They ran my medical insurance, and the insurance hadn't been paid since March. But I knew my daughter needed help. So the facility worked with me. Whatever money I had went towards my daughter's treatment. My family helped me. And I went and found my daughter, who begged me not to make her go, who hated me for making her go. And we boarded a plane on July 2nd and flew to Florida, where one of the hardest things I don't think I'll ever have to do is leave my child somewhere while she's looking at me and begging me not to leave her there. Please, Mommy, please, don't leave me here with these people. But I knew I had to. That's why I left her there. And I flew back home. And that was on July 2nd. And she would spend 8 weeks there. 8 weeks of hating me every minute. of those 8 weeks and blaming me for leaving her there. So on July 5th, after I flew back from Florida, totally drained, totally defeated, my colleague that I told you about, my friend, who said he had a job for me, said, come to my birthday party on July 5th. My partner's going to be there. He wants to talk to you. You start working for us right away. We'll talk salary, requirements, when you're going to start, what your salary is going to be. And we'll get you started right away. Don't even worry about it. You knew this Mr. X was a nut job. And, you knew there was no end game. You already knew he was, there was something not right there. So it is what it is. Now you're going to come to work for me. And you're going to finally get paid your worth. And you're going to, you're an awesome fit. My partner's going to love you. Come to my birthday party. And you're going to meet him. And we're going to make it all happen. All right. So I'll see you there. So on July 4th, I packed up my stuff, put on my birthday party clothes, got in my car because I was broke at that point, and I drove to the tri-state area for my friend and colleague's birthday party. I got about 8 hours into the 9-hour drive. I was right there, and he called me. And so I said, happy birthday. And he said, it's not my birthday. Today's not my birthday. And I said, what do you mean today's not your birthday? Of course it is. It's July 5th. And he said, no, my birthday's not for a few days. Okay, well, I'll call you in a few days then. And so I called his family. And my friend was battling cancer. And the medicine that he was on was messing with the chemistry in his thoughts. And so they were trying to balance that out for him while he fought this horrible disease. So there was no job. There was no birthday party. There was no partner to meet. There was no reason for me to be in the tri-state area. And my friend was very sick. So I pulled over and I sat there in a McDonald's parking lot. And I just cried for about an hour. Then I turned my car around and I drove back home, where I did what any normal, strong woman would do. I laid in bed for days, maybe weeks. My daughter calling me, still hating me, saying awful things, blaming me, begging me to take her home. And I couldn't do that. So I laid in bed for a while, defeated. I felt like I just couldn't get up. And every time I tried to get up, I felt like I got pushed back down. And so this is where I'm going to leave you off. Because I do eventually get back up. But I will tell you, one of the things I remember most about this time, because it was worse than changing your career. It was worse than the lies. It was worse than anything else, any other consequence that came out of this. This was the dark time. This was the hardest part because it affected my children and what I was supposed to be doing as their mother. And so I felt like I failed. Like I didn't do my job. I remember sitting on my kitchen floor and just crying. And I had to get up And for some reason, I don't even know why I did it, because it's outside my character. I had to go to church, and I remember because it was pouring rain, and I went to the church, and I tried every door. There was 4 doors, and I stood there in the pouring rain, soaking wet, and none of the doors were open. So I went to the school. I must have looked crazy. And my hair is soaking wet, matted to my head. My clothes are soaked, and I begged the woman in the office. I said, please, just let me in the church, please, for just 5 minutes. You can stand there. I'm not going to steal anything. I just need to be in the church. So I must have looked totally nuts to her, but she let me in the church. And I went into the church, and I just knelt before the crucifix, because I felt like I needed to ask for forgiveness. I begged for forgiveness because I felt like I must have done something horribly wrong that I needed forgiveness for. That he must be really mad at me, and I needed him to forgive me for what it was that I did, so that I could stand up again and move on and fix this mess. And so don't get me wrong, I didn't leave the church, and there was no angels singing and bright golden lights. I still felt like total shit when I left the church, but I felt like it was something I needed to do, and so I did it. And I came home, and I went right back to bed. But these were the dark times, and that's what I remember. These were the worst of times. I remember feeling totally defeated, just done. And I didn't know how to fix it. For the first time since I'm 14 years old, I had no job, no money. It was the first time I was ever late on a mortgage payment. I had my daughter in treatment. Boxes packed all over. A house that had been closed on with no funding. I was done. And so I laid in bed for a little while longer. So that's where I'm going to leave you. Like I said, I do eventually pick myself up and dust myself off with the help of my friends and my family. And at this point, there were also people, the same people that told me, you have to go, you have to try. Why do you not feel like you're worth it? Of course it's real. He knows that you're good at what you do. That's why he wants to hire you. Those same people who told me that I was just insecure for listening to my gut instincts were now the ones saying to me, or saying behind my back, oh, what did she think? Did she really think that he wanted her to work there? Did she really think that he was going to get all these benefits? So now I was the crazy one. But it doesn't matter. So when I do pick myself up in the next chapter, you'll be able to understand me a lot better. I won't be sobbing. And because this was by far the hardest thing to talk about. Because most times on Facebook, everybody's so happy and life is so great. But life isn't always so great. So if we put down our filters for our selfies, and we stop picking out just the best of the pictures, underneath all that, there's real life going on. So it was hard for me to tell this part of the story on Facebook or on anything. But it was real, and it happened. So in the next chapter, I get up, I find my strength, I find my attorney, and I call my old employer, and I start to move forward. So that's where I'm going to leave you. Thanks for waiting, and next chapter I will be a lot more happier to tell. Thank you. Have a good night.